Hello there. Welcome to episode number 4 of the Maker Manager Money podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners, and business partnerships to inspire entrepreneurs to keep going and to inspire future entrepreneurs to just start. My name is Kyle Knowles, and this episode is being recorded in the recording studio at Kiln at the Gateway Mall in Salt Lake City. Kiln uses the word bespoke on their website with the heading Bespoke Experiences. I had to look up the word bespoke, and the definition of bespoke is, quote, made for a particular customer or user. Kiln's co-working and actual office space is creative, hip, and high-tech. I love it here and plan to spend many a night and a weekend at Kiln with future guests, just hoping that some of this magic atmosphere rubs off on the Maker Manager Money podcast, a bespoke podcast. My guest today is Lynn Christian, who City Weekly just named Best Life Coach. City Weekly says that Lynn is in the business of courage. As a speaker, master certified life and business coach, and founder of Soul Salt Incorporated, among her techniques are one-to-one coaching, online courses, and intense boot camps. Lynn has been featured in Utah Business, iHeartRadio, TEDx, and American Salon. Lynn is also an author who recently published Soul Salt, Your Personal Field Guide to Confidence, Purpose, and Fulfillment. If you have considered changing careers, are unhappy with your current circumstances, or simply want more fulfillment out of life, look no further. Soul Salt will guide you to uncover the key elements required to create the map you need to succeed. I stole that straight from the back cover of the book. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Right. Thanks for being here. By the way, happy birthday. Was it last week?
Yes, Friday.
Okay. You call yourself a 64-year-old badass. I'm 54. So what is it going to take for me to join the 64-year-old badass club in 10 years?
Well, so the first thing is I didn't aspire to that. When I turned 50, I started doing triathlons, and people started calling me a badass. I lifted 245 pounds, which was a double body deadlift. And I thought it has to be more than what I can do in competition and more than what I can do in the gym. So I asked around, why are you calling me a badass? And come to find out, it's because I know my truth and I live it. So if you do that, no matter what the age, in my book, and I did write the book, you're badass. And if you want to know what those elements are that make you a badass, get the book, do your excavation, do the work. It's a lot of work. It's a field guide. And when you find out those pieces of truth, if you live by those, if you say no to anything that doesn't align with those things that you find out about yourself, and you say yes, or at least consider those things that you find out about yourself in the book, and then find out what's the highest self, what's the best decision out of those options, you'll be a badass.
I love it. I love the answer. I love the definition of badass, too. Can you talk about your career journey that culminated in being the director of innovation at Franklin Covey, then starting your own coaching business?
Yeah, so I started out in high school, actually, thinking I would become an attorney because I was in debate. And in 3 years of high school, I earned the highest speaker points in all 4. So in a debate, you have your partner, and then you debate and argue against 2 others. And out of all the 4 people in every debate of 3 years, I had the highest speaking points. We didn't always win all the debates, but I looked at that pattern because I'm a pattern reader, and I thought, well, that's just telling me I should go to law school. And I was struggling with some health issues. Really, it was an addiction that I wasn't really talking much about. And I was supposed to be training for track. And I was out running, and I had a really bad night the night before. It felt like crap. And I sat down in the gutter, literally sat on the curb, and my feet were in the gutter. And I thought, do I want to spend the rest of my life arguing? And I looked up, and there was my elementary school across the street. And I thought, no, I want to do what this teacher or that teacher did for me. I want to inspire people. And so in high school, I changed direction and decided to go into elementary ed, which a lot of people were like, why are you doing that? And I thought, you don't understand what I felt in that moment. I went through college. I got out quickly. I didn't enjoy college. It was a bunch of jumping through hoops for other people's requirements. And later found out that one of my core values is freedom and integrity. And I just felt like a lot of college is around learning and doing things that a teacher expects and not necessarily something that prepares you for life. So I got through school very quickly, started teaching, and found a calling. But after 15 years in the public schools, I could see that things were changing. Children were coming into my classrooms with more home life problems and unable to learn. And we were not addressing that. And this was in the 90s. Goldman had just published Emotional Intelligence, and I thought, why are we not teaching these kinds of skills? I also noticed that where interest and passion intersect inside a child as it does in an adult, that's where we learn. That's where we can grow. That's where we have potential. So I started nurturing that and giving an hour. It was called Individualized Guided Education and also inquiry-based education. And I went down to, spent some of my own personal money, went to Tucson, there were 3 or 4 teachers that were publishing on this topic, started modeling my classroom around that, where every day and throughout the week there were time slots for the children to start pursuing their own inquiry problems. We had kids calling Beaverton to find out, why did Nike use the swoosh? What does that mean? We had somebody finding a hippie that was underground in the community who had jammed with Janis Joplin. We found all kinds of questions. One kid was like, why do psychologists use rats and mazes to learn things? And so we had him go to the local university and start partnering with them, and they let him do odd jobs, and he started getting a maze and a rat and doing things himself. These were the kinds of dynamics that I felt like we needed to teach the kids. And also, when they came in from recess, we would do some self-soothing so that they could be ready to learn. And that very much threatened people around me. And I got a Multi-Sensory Teacher of the Year award for that from the parents. They voted that. But I could see what was happening to my students and to myself as I could see this freight train coming down the track of standardized tests and somebody deciding how intelligent our kids were based on these IQ tests and not addressing the whole child. And I even spoke and kind of got pushed on by some of my peers. I spoke and I said, we need to do something different. The charter schools, the private schools are going to eat our lunch if we don't actually wake up. And they felt like I was treasonous. And, you know, when you're on the cutting edge, and entrepreneurs will feel this, and I did have an entrepreneur and innovator in me, I wanted to do what was best for the children, for their education, and also for their life learning. That was not cohesive when you put it into a public school. It was disruptive. And I thought, I don't belong here. They're going to figure this out one way or another. You know, capitalism is going to come in and crush some of the public schools, and I don't want to be around to watch that, and I don't want to be a part of that system. And I don't want to continue to go to school every day and have a couple of teachers picking at me and bad-mouthing me, and then doing that to my students. That's just anti-educational and toxic. So I left and became a consultant in a small group, educational consultant. And then I could recognize that I wasn't going to be happy there. And I asked one of the best network people I knew at the time, my neighbor, and she said, why don't you talk to a business coach? And I'd never heard what that was before. I was like, what is that? And I went and met with a business coach, and she just wowed me with her lifestyle. She'd been on the mountain, hiking. She came down into her office in her home. Her commute was like 1 minute from the tea kettle to her seat. She had a little cup of yummy tea sitting there, and I'm a tea drinker as well. And I thought, hiking boots, teacup, small commute, lifestyle I want. How do I get that? So she coached me, and I got introduced to Franklin Covey and was hired to be an innovator. So I began writing. They hired me because I had instructional design. And the VP that was over innovation at the time hired me because he was a former school teacher too. And he said, Lynn, I know you know how to manage people and budgets, and I know how you know how to manage time. So eventually you might become a project manager. And I did. And so I was getting my projects done on time, on quality. All the metrics were there. And got some good writing in, did some ghost writing for Franklin Covey, had some books that were published without my name on it, but some nice little things that said, yes, you can do this. And so I tossed my hat in the ring to become the Associate Director of Innovation over a project management office and finished up my coach training on the side because as soon as I'd seen that coach, I wanted to get the training, not because I wanted to be a coach, but because I wanted the lifestyle. And I thought, this person's character is so well defined and she's adulting. I would want to become an adult. I need that finishing school. So I got the training on the side while I was working at Franklin Covey. And then one day, I was working away at this project management office as the associate director, and we had some great success. I was doing some training around project management and then coaching the rest of the hours of how to use our own project management protocol and process that we were training to the world. And in 9 months, we'd accrued $4 million worth of value in closed projects.
Wow.
And so it was a very valuable piece of work to be working with. Marva Sadler was the COO at the time, and she and I have remained really good friends as we both have moved on. But it was during that time that one of the individuals from the coaching part of the company came over and said, would you consider being our director of innovation? Which fit. I mean, I'm an innovator. I was in the innovation group to write their products first, initially. Then I became part of the Project Management and Innovation Center, and now they wanted me to be Director of Innovation at the Franklin Covey coaching section of the company. And I just jumped at that and got the job. And that was, as I got into that, I also realized that my heart was still with my own practice that I was doing on the side because I actually found out I was really good at it. And I loved it. So I had a legal agreement with Franklin Covey that I could be their director of innovation over the coaching company and work for them from 9 to 5 and go out and train. Every once in a while, go out of town and run their coach training. And I could also run Soul Salt. And so in 2004, I left and had built up my own company to the point where that's what I really wanted to do, was run Soul Salt.
That's
so
awesome.
that's a long story. That's the genesis of me becoming an entrepreneur.
No, I love it. And so when you did the coaching training that your mentor, you saw your mentor
Yes.
and you were like, I want to do that coaching training. You invested your own money to go
I did.
get some of that training.
I did on the side.
Right.
I went to my savings account. I pulled out my tuition and I worked for the next 4 years to get that certification and got my certification through the ICF.
And that's how you were able to start doing stuff on the side, was with that certification.
With that certification. And also that helped because I had my MCC. At the time, there were only about 2,000 of us in the world who had that master certification. There's not a lot more than that now. It's a very high designation to get, lots of hours, lots of credentials. And it's not necessary that you have that high of a certification with them, but that's what I qualified for, with all the hours and being able to pass the practicum. And so I have the MCC, and that helped because Franklin Covey wanted somebody that had that high level of certification through. We don't have a governing body right now in coaching. There are a couple that are vying for it, but the ICF leads, in my opinion. And they needed that behind somebody, so I had the right pedigree.
And is the MCC, is that more focused on coaching business people, or is it life coaching? Is it a combination of both?
The MCC is based on the core competence that underlies any other kind of coaching. Whether you branch out at executive coaching, you branch out in entrepreneurial coaching, or life coaching. Now, my particular brand of coaching is an amalgam. I have been personally mentored and trained by Marshall Goldsmith. In fact, that's his foreword in my book. Mm-hmm. And he is the premier executive coach in the world. So I have been trained how to do executive coaching. I've also gone into studying from David Peterson, Dr. David Peterson, who's a former head coach for Google. And so I continue to be trained in executive coaching. I've gone to Australia and learned from Grant Suzalu and Marvin Oka, who wrote the book on embraining, multiple brain integration, which is neuroscience background. I have a neuroscience background and trained with them personally before Grant passed away. And so I have this neuroscience background that helps in all veins. And then I have a myriad of other certifications. I have CIQ, Conversational Intelligence, with Judith Glaser before she passed. I have a number of things that I've put together that fit executives and fit entrepreneurs and can also fit into career reinvention. So the basic thing that I do is assist people to be the best version of what they possibly can be, which is kind of the recipe inside the book. Be that an executive or an entrepreneur or somebody who is like, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life and I'm 40 and that's scary. How do I reinvent? I know how to do that. I've done that about 12 times between my personal life and professional life. But the underlying key to my coaching is I can get in and see the person in a way that maybe they haven't seen themselves, reflect that to them, be by their side as they start to grasp this element or two of themselves that they maybe haven't, and then be able to move up the trajectory. Because the truth is, there are a lot of things about us that unless we understand these things, we don't reach potential. In my book, and I've written a blog on this, if anybody wants to look at my high potential blog out on Soul Salt, there are two things that are consistently necessary for somebody to reach their potential. The first one is they have to be in tune with their highest self. So they have to be listening to themselves. One of my entrepreneurial clients calls it her gut toaster. And I talk about it in my TEDx talk. You have to have an inner wisdom that helps you make these decisions, because entrepreneurs, innovators, we need to know when our yeses are. In fact, we need to know the difference between our yeses and our hell yeses, if I can say that word.
Yes, you can.
And so sometimes it's a felt sense. So if you can be in touch with that higher self, and you can also believe that there's a comet with your name on it, there's a vision, there's a mountain calling for you, there's a higher level, a higher degree of mastery that you can get to, those have to be in place for someone to reach their potential. And I know how to assist people to see those things if they don't, or if they do see them, how to awaken them so they can take off.
Yeah, and whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, high-level executive, it's that personal inner stuff that needs to be worked out anyway to be an awesome executive, right?
Yeah, and if you look at it, I started being mentored by a millionaire, a self-made millionaire, when I was still a school teacher. That's one of the reasons why I left education too. And I would go over and sit with him in his home, and he would mentor me about business. And I would read books. And then when Franklin Covey hired me, I would read all kinds of business books, and I would be in these meetings with these executives, and I learned business in the trenches. A high-level, very talented female executive from a tech company that I'm working with right now refers to it as getting your MBA while you're working. And so I would say that I have learned a lot about business and human dynamics and decision-making, and that's what helps me be in the pocket there with executives.
Nice. What are the most common reasons a business owner or an entrepreneur would hire you as a coach?
They need to level up. Let's say that you're coming in. Let's say that you're an entrepreneur and you've created a business that now has $20 million in the bank, and you recognize that you have a shelf life. You've got to transition, either leave the company or transition to a useful place and put a CEO in place, if you're smart. One of the most published and reprinted revolution kind of articles is out of Harvard, and it talks about these stages of needing a different leadership for a different stage. So if you're an entrepreneur who's reached that and you're just like, I wonder if my leadership fits, it's a good question to ask. It's a humble question to ask. It's a smart question to ask. Making that transition of where do I play, and do I still play here? Am I a serial entrepreneur? Should I leave and go start another one? Those are questions that they have to answer, and those are critical. If you're a CEO coming in and taking the reins over from an entrepreneur, that's a sweet spot for me as well, because I understand that dynamic from the entrepreneurial side and also from the organizational side. That's what helped me with Marva and Marva Sadler as the COO at Franklin Covey, where we were hemorrhaging money at the time, and we needed to get our projects completed. We had a failure rate of like over 70% of our own projects. And so we needed to start applying our own process. Well, you start to see that there's this time in the life cycle of a business where somebody needs to come in and put the operational, systemic, functional pieces of the pie together. And so assisting someone to take over after an entrepreneur has finished, that's another sweet spot. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Totally. Okay, so I want to go to your book for a little bit now. I mean, I love the quote by poet and philosopher John O. Donahue that starts your book, and I'll just read it right now.
Yeah, please.
Learning to trust your soul, it lies in opposition to looking to others for life purpose and personal teaching, and it waits patiently for us each day, quietly calling us back home. Can you talk about how you came across this quote and how it influenced you?
Right. So I felt like John was giving me the prelude to the book. Anybody who knows him or has read his stuff, basically, you'll recognize these words. He alludes to the fact that we all need to be the choreographer of the topography of our life. I believe that. This came to me from Stephanie Milani, who was reading my book because she's the wife of my publisher. And she said, that's what John Donahue is saying. And I went, yeah. And she sent me this quote, and I said, yes, we have to put this in the introduction. So I would, if that resonates with you, I would say go out, and he's passed now. He died very young. If you go into YouTube and listen to him, you will be inspired by everything you hear him say. But he gave that prelude to me, and I'm very grateful because he said the words that nailed the purpose of the book.
Okay. So I wondered if it was the genesis of Soul Salt in the original Soul Salt Incorporated, or if it fit, right?
With the book. With the book. And it came within hours of when we said this is the final draft.
I love that.
So, I'm a big believer that the things you need come to you when you need them. But the spirit of what he was saying has always lived inside of me, and I believe it lives inside of everyone. That's why it runs so deep when you read it. And if it hits home for you, you're a good candidate for reading the book. You're a good candidate for going out and exploring what we do at Soul Salt, because we're just bringing you home to yourself. The Soul Salt book is a coming of self book for adults.
I like that description. So I wanted to ask you, why do so many people feel less than or not worthy of possibility? Is it really human nature, or is it pounded into us from parents and pulpits?
Probably both. We don't have to rail on the parents and pulpits because we've all had experiences with well-meaning parents. None of us that have been parents, that's a humbling job.
Right.
You never get it right.
Yeah.
Even if you're trying to be in tune with your kids, you're going to misfire. And those tender little hearts are going to be crushed at some time when you least expected it. And there are a lot of should, coulds, and not tos. There are a lot of organizations that are going to say, here's your role, here's your script, live your life. We also don't take our own mortality very seriously. And so we get to the end of it and we have a lot of regrets. More people have regrets than not. And I mentioned that with Bronnie Ware's book, or her information. But I think there's this other piece that you mentioned, which is some of it's just neuroscience. We have 4 parts. I'm going to use Judith Glaser's model of the head brain. We have 4 parts to our brain, and 2 of them that we use the most without knowing it would be the brain stem and this primitive brain area, the limbic brain. And so its job is to sense things in our environment and let us know not safe, safe. So it's always vigilant, trying to find out how it can keep this human species alive. And there's a lot of threat in the world. I mean, we're on a spinning planet, hanging on to gravity to keep us here in a hostile environment. Asteroids are out there, lack of oxygen is out there, right. Climate change. You look at everything that's happening, and it's not necessarily a safe environment to raise anything with constant change. And so there's a part of us that can feel that threat. And so we're looking constantly for, am I safe, not safe? And so we're tuned into looking for the negative because it keeps us alive versus charging after the positive. And that's just a matter of neurochemistry and our innate biology. And so we have to override and we have to become smarter. That's why I think Goleman's work and the EQ work, emotional intelligence work, was so important, helping us tune in to self-regulation, conversations that are mature with ourselves about what's really happening. Yes, I have cortisol spewing through my body right now. I'm triggered. How do I get untriggered? How do I give myself the discipline of the 20 minutes to let that dissipate if it's going to, and become more sane and get into my prefrontal cortex? How do I not just stay in the analytical part of my brain? How do I not stay in the neocortex and just think things and become a head on a stick? And so there are 3 other brains we have to work through and self-regulate to get to the prefrontal cortex. And then if you've listened to my TEDx talk, the beauty of being in the prefrontal is you can drop into the neurons that are firing in the heart and the gut and get a full sensation. But you got to be in the front of the body, not on your back foot, trying to defend yourself. And that kind of goes against human nature, right? So if you haven't explored some of these things and ventured out, there's a good reason. You're not a failure. You're just part of the human race, and this is what it's like to overcome being human and become a better version of you as a human. You probably have a suspicion that it's in there. And if my words are sparking that for you, just say, you've had many good reasons why you haven't found these things before. And I've given you just a brief description of some of them. Now it's your turn. If something's sparking with you and you're like, yeah, I really want to know my truth and live that, okay, here's the invitation. Read the book. Or I have an online course called Be True. It's a good starting point. It's one of the chapters in the book, but that's a really good place to go out on my website and find that and just nail that one thing down, and you will feel different and see yourself in a new way that gives you courage and more purpose and more fulfillment.
Okay. I don't know if I'm unusual or if you can talk about other people that maybe feel this way, but I mean, I've spent a lot of time, books.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tony Robbins, whatever.
Right.
A lot of throughout my career, throughout my life. But sometimes it feels like I just come back and it's circular.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm like, Kyle, you got to get your shit together.
Yeah.
What is that about? Like, I keep coming back to that. Like, I don't know what that shit is exactly. Mm-hmm. And do I need to get it together? What is that about? And do you have people come to you with that kind of situation?
Yes. A lot of people that come to me are stuck somewhere. So I don't know. Excuse me, we'd probably have to get into a coaching session.
Okay.
But one place to look, excuse me, is what did you find out about your core values? Do you know those?
I do.
Have you noticed where you've maybe not been in alignment with those?
Yes.
That's one of the reasons. That's the very first step. That's why I say if you get the book, you can go to chapter 3, you can go to my online course called Be True. It's worth the investment. That's a starting point. You go back and look at your life and look at some of those decisions you've made, and you ask, why am I always going against my line of integrity? And so you're out of alignment. Once you get in alignment, you can engage flow. And you can overstep some of the things. Also, we're habitual. We are wired for habit. And so you're going to have to rewire some of those neural networks. And that requires an objective, kind awareness of this has to change. This one thing I'm going to isolate and change. And sometimes we try to change too many things. We're not light switches. We can't just flip them on and off. We're more like a dimmer switch.
Yeah.
And so we incrementally need to become aware of that thing. And then once we're there, we have to set humble, tiny, bite-sized steps in place, tiny goals, consistently do those and be undaunted, fearlessly consistent and persistent. That's a big process to even just unwind one thing. But once you unwind one thing, it's like if you've ever tried to untangle a knot in a dog leash or in a ball of yarn, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Get one thing done and the rest goes forward.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that the way we speak to ourselves,
right?
We would not speak to anyone.
Anybody else. Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible.
Well, but you're probably just spewing out recordings that you've heard.
Yeah.
Right? And then you get to a place where you can say, okay, what's the reason that I did that? Okay, that's a good reason. And you stop having so many expectations, and you start, like in this chapter in the book, on success, you start defining your own success metrics.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's really easy in our careers, working for a company, to always be discussing possibilities and doing more, being more. why don't we spend more time in our personal lives focusing on possibility?
Gosh, maybe that's because you don't earn a paycheck, or you don't get a raise, or you don't get outside appraisal. Not appraisal, but acknowledgement. And I think a lot of us, some cultures are more so than this. I find this one in Utah very prevalently, as I live here in Utah with many citizens, is that the home is the thing that is so pedestrian. And so we don't necessarily feel like, if we succeed there, we've really won the prize. It's got to be the outward. And so instead of the inward world, it's the same thing with ourselves. Why do we talk to ourselves this way, but we wouldn't do that outward? We have to look inward, and that starts with self and then goes to home. So there's a lot of reasons. But you're nailing something that is often the case for a lot of us.
Yeah. I mean, I just love the chapter on possibility practice.
Yes.
And that whole concept. And it was eye-opening to me to try to even list 10 things for each of those list of questions. Some of them, it was very easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like where I'd like to go.
That's a fun one.
There's
right?
a lot of places I've never been. So it's easy to just start listing everywhere that would be cool to go. But some of them were harder for me to dive into, like accomplishment and the things that were more about me and not some external thing that I could, go buy or go see. So
that makes sense. And, unless you've been raised from the cradle up of what are your possibilities? What's possible for you? What would you like to do? What do you aspire to? What is your heart saying? We don't have that language nailed down. And so a lot of us we have to do that later, retrofit it. And if you're in that place, be patient. Good reason. There's a lot of things that have happened up to this point to put you where you are.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels self-serving or selfish or like
because you're not used to
wrong.
it. Yeah. But if you look at the people who are leading the way and having some of the most inspired lives, it's because they'd allowed themselves to know that truth about themselves and then to live pieces of it. You can't live all of it. I think once you find out how big, audacious, bold, and badass you really are, it's hard to be true to all of it because there's so much potential and possibility. But if you can be true to a percentage of that, you're heads and shoulders above most human beings.
Right. I know that you mentioned that one of your mentors had you spend 30 days coming up with 100 possibilities.
Judith did, yes.
What's a rough guess about what percent of those have actually come to fruition?
Gosh, if I had the journal here, I could show you. I would say it's 20 to 25%.
That's still a lot.
It's a lot. And that's a big, big, beautiful thing in my life. And as I look at that original list, I've made another list since then. I would say that 40 to 50% of the things I would no longer put on the list and I would replace them. So it's in the book, I encourage you, once you have your possibility practice going, you have to kind of spring clean it every once in a while and check off things, and because you grow and you evolve. And some things that really mattered to you 5 years ago will have there's no value in them anymore. You can nod at them and go, yeah, that's where I was. Look where I am now.
Was physical fitness and fencing on your original list, or was that something that came later from those possibilities?
So the physical fitness started kicking in after I turned 50 because I had worked with one of the well-known, world-renowned gyms that's here in Salt Lake, which is Jim Jones. I worked with Lisa and Mark, who are the founders of that. And they had just finished the 300 movies and had a lot of success. And Sean Trujillo, a very successful businessman here in Salt Lake, he and Angie, who have the Lunatic Fringe salons, they said, you should work with Lynn. She's been our business coach. So they hired me. And after we finished our work, Mark turned to me and he said, that was really interesting, thank you. I want to coach you now. Come to the gym and I'll sponsor you. I had never been in a gym, and I was turning 50, and they taught me how strong I was. I did that double body deadlift and went, holy crap, I'm strong. And then they challenged me. They said, look, by that time, Rob Maximus McDonald had come in and been a manager. He's not with them any longer, but they all challenged me and said, we'll keep sponsoring you here at the gym. You seem to love it, and I did. I loved it. I loved seeing how strong, and I had a lot of endurance. I did a 20-minute plank, And I thought, why are you guys making a big deal about this? Nobody's shooting guns at me. I'm sitting here. I can go into a meditative state. Nobody's kicking me, yelling at me. This is a peaceful thing to do. And they were like, that's unusual. I mean, Rob was timing me, and he just finally said, look, I'm going to go lift some weights. I'm going to leave the timer on your back. Tell me when you're tired. And it was 20 minutes later. And then I found out, this is supposed to be a really hard thing.
20 seconds is hard for a lot of people.
So when I met this group, they showed me some things, and they said that if you're going to stay here, you need to have a functional reason. The actors, the actresses, the Navy SEALs, the fire fighters, all the people coming, the MMA fighters, all the people coming into this gym have a function. You're just here because we invited you. If you want to stay, you got to compete or do something. And I had almost drowned as a child, and I said, oh, shoot, I know what I need to do, because I need to learn to swim, and I need to run myself through triathlons, which scared the crap out of me. It scared something more, but I won't use that four-letter word.
You can.
And
I used it already.
Yes, it scared the shit out of me. And I also knew that it excited me to finally, at turning 50, learn how to swim. And not just swim, but swim competitively in open water while wearing a wetsuit. And that's a dangerous place during a triathlon. The swim is where a lot of people die in triathlons. And they trained me so well, I took second in my age group in my first triathlon. I was amazed at how my body was recovering when I was still pedaling, not up a steep hill, but pedaling on a smaller grade. And then when I got to a steeper grade, I could kick it in. And I was like, they have trained me so well. I had such deep respect for what they did for my body that I've maintained that. But over time, I could tell that the large muscle recruitment was wearing me down. Mm-hmm. I was aging and hormones and going through menopause and things like that. And so my son and I tried a season of Spartan races, and it was the same thing. I was kind of burning myself out, losing agility and not being as nimble. And I'd always wanted to fence. And I thought, I'm going to go do that. So I started fencing, and that brought back the coordination, the balance, the nimbleness, and it required everything that I had learned in endurance sports transferred. I noticed I was fencing this week, and I was fencing against 40-year-olds at the national tournament, and I'd get off the strip, and I could just nasal breathe my way over and not even be out of breath after a tough bout, and they were taking off their mask and drinking water and wiping their brow, and I was like, okay, this fitness is still there. And so I use it because I think it's a key to keeping the engine alive that runs my business. Yeah. And I want entrepreneurs to hear this. You can wear yourself like a second-hand Deseret Industries person and expect your business to be $1 million proposition. It's not going to happen if you're treating yourself like crap. If you can get yourself into a position where you can think and feel and act and respond in a way where you really respect yourself, your work will show that, and your business depends on there being a functional engine under the hood, if you will, right, to get those tires moving and the pistons firing.
So what does a typical week look like for you, physical fitness-wise? What are some of the things that you're doing during a typical week?
Monday I do some intermittent fasting, so I don't have breakfast. And that's because I've had maybe cookies and ice cream or something on the weekend. I don't go crazy, but I've had something I typically don't eat. I use the Whole30 diet, Monday through Friday. And then I'll have a more embellished menu, but not going crazy. And I have, I'll get up, I'll do stretches. I will do knees over toes to keep my joints going. I'll do some complex shoulder moves because I did have a shoulder repair. And I had to go in and get a rotator cuff surgically sewn back together. And take the dogs out for a walk, and then I do 30 minutes of fencing footwork and blade work, and then I go to work. And then after work, I have a training session that is for the endurance or the strength or some piece of that, and then I do another 30 to 40 minutes of something with the fencing. And so that repeats itself until Fridays, and I only do the intermittent fasting on Mondays. I, a good healthy 3 meals from Whole30, get 8 hours of sleep as much as possible, 7 hours and 45 minutes minimum, sometimes 9 hours. Drink plenty of good water. On Fridays, I do an endurance run, which is basically a steady state for an hour, hour and a half, keeping my heart rate at 120, 130. Saturday mornings, open fencing. Wednesday nights I have another lesson. And then by Saturday this time, I'm done with that, all the training, and the rest of the weekend is recovery. So a lot of walks. I roll out every night. I have a salt bath every night. I do flexibility moves every night. And that's how I keep a 64-year-old body, being able to compete with 40-year-olds at national tournaments.
That's awesome.
So it's been fun.
That's a lot of training, I guess. You
Yeah.
know, a couple hours a day, really, between the fencing footwork and the other
There are
stuff
a lot
you're
of
doing?
hours, through everything. I would say there's about 20 to 25 hours a week minimum.
Okay.
And I have a coach here in Salt Lake that works with me on Wednesday nights, one-to-one. And then I have a coach in Denver. My head coach is in Denver. He comes to the national tournaments with me. He's my strip coach and coaches me on the sideline, he and his team.
Nice. And you just got back from fencing up in Kaysville today.
I did this morning, yeah. I ran up there. I only had about an hour, and I ran up and got 45 minutes in. I wanted to because I'd spent well over 12 hours fencing on Sunday and Monday of this week.
Okay.
And I've not done a lot. I've just kind of been in recovery, and I want to go up there and just get my moves on and keep the ball rolling. To see where I was after a national tournament, I went from an E rating to a D rating, so it's like in martial arts, if you go up a belt. I went up a belt. I did well enough to do that. And so I just needed that for my mental and physical to say, yeah, you were tired, but you're excited to go up and just spend 45 minutes, fighting somebody.
Yeah. That's so fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's exciting. You mentioned in your book coming out twice. What do you mean by that?
Well, so I came out in my 40s and recognized that I was attracted to people of my same gender. Had a hardest time pulling the L word out of my mouth and saying I'm a lesbian. I knew I was different from a young age, but it's not. I like men and women. I can see beauty in both of these genders. But if you have to ask, who do I really want to bond with? It's the soul of a female. And knowing that was like, oh, okay. So I came out. And then a year ago, I was following, about a year and a half ago now, I was following somebody, an actress, and she came out as non-binary. And I was like, what is that? I knew non-binary people. I knew about the pronouns. But I was like, why am I drawn to her and think that she's so special, watching what she's done with her life? And then, what is this? So I started studying. I went, oh my goodness, I'm non-binary. So I don't, for me, and I can only speak for me, gender identification is very fluid. And a lot of people think it's just male or female. It's not. There's a lot in between. There's a lot of research on this. And I'm in a female body. I'm a piece in this female body. I don't need to change it. I actually feel more like a guy sometimes, but I don't want to be a guy. I think men are beautiful. I love my son. I love my grandsons. I have nothing against men. I think they're so damn fun to interact with. In fact, I fence mostly with men. And I love the camaraderie that they have. I like how they see the world in many, many ways. I don't necessarily like how a lot of them see the female. But that's an individual thing. As a collective, I like that camaraderie and the slap you on the back and let's go. Yeah, I just jabbed my sword into your shoulder and maybe that hurt a little bit, but it was all in fun, right, Lynn? And I was like, yes, it was, and I'm going to hit you twice as hard next time, I like that kind of coming around to each other. And so, but I don't identify as heavily male or female, and that's, for me, how it's the non-binary. So they, them feels better than being called she. And so I've been mistaken as a guy sometimes, if they're not looking at me closely. And I was following my daughters one day, they were buying lingerie when they were little at a local department store, and the guy was standing there and he was, sir, you can't go in there. And I said, that's okay, I'm their mom. And he did a double take. He said, oh, sorry. And I said, no offense. It's just, I exude a certain male ethos to some people, and I float between the genders. And there are a lot of us who do that. And you look at the younger population, and they have embraced that. And they're teaching us a lot. So at age 63, to find out that you're non-binary was like, holy crap, where have I been? And thank goodness that we have these names for it, because all of a sudden I settled in and went, oh, yeah, that's why the lesbian word was so hard for me to say, because I'm really not one of those people. I can appreciate them, and I hang out with them, and I've partnered with them, but I'm really not that.
Okay.
So...
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that question. So how has being a former lesbian or non-binary business owner affected business? Is that...
Well, there are some people who at one point in the government said they can't work with us because our tagline was about being a badass. And I was like, that's fine. Yeah, we've lost contracts. There are people, I get criticized on social media for my pronouns. However, that's not who I'm looking for to work with.
Yeah.
I'm working with the people who are open to change, that are progressive thinkers, that are ready to evolve themselves. And if you want to find out the best of you, you can't be in a camp that others other people.
Right.
Because you're gonna find an answer to who am I that's going to be somebody else's answer. And so they're not my people, and that's okay. Somebody else should be coaching them.
Yeah.
No problem.
I like that. I like how it filters.
Sure.
I do.
Yeah.
I like how it filters. And I like your statement about the younger generation, because I think we're in good hands because of their tolerance and their love, and they want inclusion. And so I'm really hopeful for the future because of that.
Yeah, I am too. And they do give us a lot of hope, and they see the world quite clear as how it is. Love is love. We're a global community now. We're not separate. When we other somebody, we other a piece of ourselves.
Right. What's the book? I know you've read a ton of books, especially when you're at Franklin Covey probably, and during your certifications and things like that. What's a book that you recommend to people the most?
It depends upon what they're looking for. So give me a category.
How about business?
Gosh, so many good business books. I like It Takes What It Takes right now. I have a couple of executives reading that. There's some basics that you should know, like From Good to Great.
Yeah.
Some of Jim Collins'
one.
work. Yeah. I think it's good to have a subscription to something like HBR, Harvard Business Review. If you're an entrepreneur, if you have not read The E-Myth, you need to read the revised E-Myth. Gerber really nailed it there. I think that's a good one. Another category? Do you have another category?
Just, I guess, self-development or personal self-development.
You know, I like Marshall's What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Self-development, oh, man, there's so many good ones out there. If it's reinvention, it's an older book, and until I get my reinvention book, which I'm working on right now, done, this is a good one by Ibarra, which is Your Working Identity. It's a good one for that. One of the books that influenced me the most was Orbiting the Giant Hairball. Orbiting the Giant Hairball by Gordon McKenzie. He used to be a holy man, self-identifying holy man for Hallmark, and so creative. And the book inspired me to want to have the illustrations in the book that I had. And then I also learned a lot from Sunny Brown. She has a couple of TED Talks. She also wrote Doodle Revolution, Game Storming. That's where I learned that I was a visual thinker. A lot of us don't understand how we think. A lot of us are either internal or external thinkers. We might be visual thinkers. We might be auditory thinkers. It's helpful to know what you are so that you can leverage it. So those are just a handful. But I'm constantly reading.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were thinking of starting your own business, what are some of the things you would say?
What a great question. I think that's so relevant for your audience. Yeah. I would say you are suspicious that you have this company inside of you, and you are absolutely right. And the only thing that's going to get in your way is your own mind. So keep finding good mentors, keep working, learn from your mistakes, and don't give up.
Awesome. Can you share any moment during business ownership that made you cry or want to cry?
That most recently when I hear people using the book and becoming themselves. Yeah.
So those are tears of joy.
Those are tears of joy. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things. We've lived through 2008, and we've lived through the pandemic and stayed viable as a company. Those are some really scary times. But the tears would all be tears of joy, because I look at business as a sport, as a game, and you can't fail. You can only stop trying. So the things that affect me the most, where I might cry, would be more personal and things of the heart.
Okay. So you're out there on social media and you're sharing a lot about yourself, but what's something that most people might not know about you?
Yeah, because I kind of feel like an open book. Even though I can be an extrovert, there's a part of me that's an ambivert, which I really do need my quiet time. And I am able to sustain a few really close relationships, but I'm not a person who has a gaggle of really close friends. When I have a connection with somebody, I want it to have a lot of substance versus a lot of quantity. And so even though I have a lot of associates, I have a pretty small inner circle, and maybe that's something, I don't know.
Okay. So I want to just go through a lightning round of questions.
Okay.
These are just for fun. And the first thing that pops in your head, but what's your favorite candy bar?
Oh, my favorite candy bar. Oh, my goodness. I don't partake of those very often. If I were to have a candy bar, it'd be a Snickers or a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Okay. Or otherwise a protein bar, probably.
I don't even
You don't even eat protein bars. Okay.
I don't. I feel like if I'm going to have that, I might as well have a real bar.
Yeah.
And so I'll wait till the weekend.
Okay. So you have kind of a cheat window.
Well, I
at
call
least a little bit.
instead of calling
It's
it
just
a
light
cheat, because I really
You don't go crazy anyway.
I don't.
Yeah.
I just call it an embellished weekend.
Nice.
There you go.
I like that. Favorite musical artist?
Ooh, it's not one in particular, but it would be the female jazz artists that are in traditional pop and jazz. So Ella, Billy, some of those folks, yeah.
All right. Favorite cereal?
Cereal, if I'm going to drink or eat a cereal, it would probably be, it has to be a combination of put grape nuts in it, some crackling oats, and some really good high-quality oatmeal that's been warmed up.
That sounds really good, actually. I'm kind of hungry now. Mac or PC?
I run part of my life on Apple products, but my PC is a Surface, or my computer is a PC service.
Okay. Google or Microsoft?
We are using Google right now.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Phantom or Les Mis?
Probably Phantom.
Okay. I've been dying to ask you this, and I think you referenced this, but tell me how you got New York Times bestselling author and one of the most famous leadership coaches, Marshall Goldsmith, to write the foreword to your Soul Salt book.
Number one, I had a personal connection with him, so he knows who I am. Number two, I pulled on my network, and Marva from Franklin Covey reached back and helped me connect with who he's currently using as his coordinator. And then Marshall's good graces. So yeah.
Awesome. That's big time.
Yeah.
It's really big time. You're writing another book. You mentioned this. Mm-hmm. What's it going to be about?
It's going to be about how to reinvent yourself.
Okay.
And we had a team meeting yesterday, and a person who works on our finance team said it should be called No Shit. No shit.
But how you pronounce that again? No shit, like question, no
like
shit.
You no more shit.
No shit, Sherlock,
yeah,
or is that
no
more shit? No shit.
Yeah, it's more like how do you really get down to who you are and
get rid of the shit.
There are reinvention strategies that I don't put in. So in the Soul Salt book, you find out who you really are. Mm-hmm. And then in this next book, it's like, okay, how do you figure out what you can really do with who you are or who you think you are in the moment? Because sometimes we don't know who we are till we show ourselves we did that thing. Oh, now I can do that. I didn't know I could flush in fencing. I didn't know I could do an advanced lunge until I did one and then went, oh, I'm a fencer who can do that. So as an entrepreneur, you may not know that you can do a brick and mortar business until you do one. So that next book is the reinvention, the strategies of how do you take who you are at your best and then do those things that you think you can do with it.
Okay. So how can people find you and Soul Salt?
Well, we have a really good presence online. So soulsalt.com is a great starting point. You can see our online offerings. Our courses they get really good reviews. We have great blogs. I personally am posting on Instagram at Soul Salt, and you can also find me at Lynn Christian, but it's Lyn, it's one N. So we do have Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. We don't do anything on Twitter. And that's where we're present.
Okay. What's the reason you decided not to do anything on Twitter?
Well, for one thing, I started there, and that's how I got to know Sunny Brown. Okay. And we become associates of some sort. And I needed to be able to manage, just like with my friends. I can't be on all the platforms, and at some point I probably won't be the person who is posting. I'll be having people tell me what to post. And that moment's coming very, very soon. But if I needed to do the posting, I needed to have a limited amount of places to do that, and I couldn't do all of them.
Okay. Well, Lynn, I'll include links to all things
Thank
Lynn
you.
Christian and Soul Salt in the
you.
show notes at mmmpod.net. That's Maker Manager Money Pod.net. So mmmpod.net. And I just want to thank you, Lynn, for being so generous with your time today and being willing to be on this fledgling podcast. It's been a pleasure learning from you, and I hope we can work together in the near future.
That'd be great. You have done a great job of setting things up, doing your homework, and showing up. And, I do a lot of podcast interviews. You need to continue what you're doing because you do your research and you come prepared and you get quality. And if you didn't, you wouldn't get the quality. So good on you.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
All right.